Hello there and welcome to a new series called What Went Wrong. This is going to be where I take community replays, your replays of battles that you've lost online or in campaign, and have a look at what went wrong with them and figure out what exactly caused you to lose. Was it a bad build? Was it a bad play? Was it poor tactics? What could you have done differently to potentially win that battle? Let us begin. So this first one is from Zakia, so thanks to him for giving me this replay first of all. And he's playing as the Lizardmen, or Itza specifically, and he's against the High Elves in an online battle. Now the map is Leanguil, which is a relatively flat map, a bit slopey but mostly flat, some trees around, nothing too crazy. Now for his army itself, he's got a front line of 4 Saurus warriors. That is more than good enough. They'll be fine against everybody except the armor-piercing White Lions and Swordmasters perhaps, and the Phoenix Guard, but everyone else they'll be able to hold their own against. And on either end of that line, he's got Saurus Spears with shields, good enough for protecting your flanks. He's also got some more anti-large with the Temple Guard, but they're mainly here as a bodyguard for his lord, the Lifeslan. One of the best choices, it gives that healing magic, which is not only just one of the best magics, but one of the best magics for newer players because it's really simple and easy to use. There's also a Skink Chief in the sky here for all his little cheeky sniping needs. He's also got a Bastiladon solar engine, so got a bit of artillery and large monster power, and he's got 2 of these, one on kind of either side of his army, so plenty of range power, those can be very useful. And that is the main bulk of his army, all one big force, except for a few chameleon skinks which have been vanguard deployed behind the enemy in the corner, but they're quite a long way away. There's 3 units of chameleon skinks here, obviously a fantastic unit, almost essential for any Lizardmen army really, they're very powerful, fantastic at their job. He's obviously looking for some sort of flank here, that's why his vanguard deployed them all the way out there, but we'll talk about that more in a minute. For the enemy army, he's got some skirmish cav hidden in the forest here, the Regiment of Renown Illyrian Reaver Archers. They'll just no doubt be looking to harass a bit, and his main force is quite small as is often the case with High Elf armies. 4 units of Silvering Guard up front, 2 units of Loth and Seaguar with shields behind, Fire Sorceress, Tyrion on a horse, and then 2 Arcane Pigeons. 2 of these big boys flying around looking to do all the damage. As most of his army is very anti-large, very defensive, very good at holding is the Silvering Guard. Not very good at putting out damage though, but hey, that's what these 2 colourful fellas are for. And indeed, they were the biggest problems for Zakia because there was nothing he could really do about them, and they ran amok all over his army for the entire battle. He was, though, able to beat most of the rest of the army. He pretty much won the battle, but there was nothing he could do about the 2 sparkly sparrows. At least, that's how he felt. Let's take a look at what went wrong. So at the start of the battle here, Zakia's playing it cool. He's playing defensive. He's got the artillery advantage. He's just going to stay back. The enemy's bringing his skirmish cav around the flank. These aren't too big of a worry. Skirmish cav, very slow damage output. He's turning his spears, getting their shields to absorb some of those missiles. Nice moves there. Getting his Bastiladons to fire on them, which is the best call you've got, really. That solar engine, pretty good at taking out skirmish cav, and one of the few choices that the Lizardmen really have for that job, as they don't have any long-range missiles. He's going to bring the other one over to do that as well. And his enemy's just bringing this skirmish cav around the back to try and harass him, to try and give him something to think about. A couple of nice shots landing there from those solar engines, doing lots of damage, reducing the skirmish cav model count, which in turn reduces their damage output, which is pretty slow anyway. Now, let's talk about these chameleon skinks coming in on the flank here. This is a risky business to run chameleon skinks around by themselves with no kind of protection. If there was some war lions or some heavy cav that discovered these, that would be the end of them. But he's going to push these on to continue to flank around the back, which I think is one of his biggest mistakes. So what should he have done at this particular moment in the battle? I think he should have pulled his chameleon skinks back to the rest of his army, seeing that there were 2 phoenixes there. There's nothing else in his army that could really do a lot about those 2 phoenixes except these chameleon skinks. They'll be able to keep constant pressure on those, blasting them if they attack anything. If they attack this Bastiladon, 2 of these can start pressuring that phoenix with fire. And the same on the other side. And we're keeping these chameleon skinks nice and spread out, so if a phoenix attacks one unit, then the other 2 units can come over and help to save it and start shooting at that phoenix while they're fighting it, probably making it run away. So at this point in the battle, that's what I would have done. Pulled those chameleon skinks back to the rest of my army because I could see that there's no other way I can deal with those 2 phoenixes. Missiles are the single best way to take down any slippery target that you can't keep a hold of very well, especially flying units, because even if they're in the air, you can still shoot them. You can't attack them with swords or anything else. Missiles are the key against these kind of units. And the Bastiladons you might think would be good against these phoenixes, but they're not. The Phoenixes have a fire resistance, and the solar engines cause fire damage, so they don't really do any damage to the Phoenixes at all. The skirmishers were the only way to really get decent damage on those Phoenixes. And of course, anti-large units like Spears and the Temple Guard will do great against those Phoenixes, but only if they can get near them, which any half-decent enemy player won't let happen. They'll keep moving and running away as soon as those Spears come over. Now, these two solar engines are still firing at the skirmish cap behind them, but they really should have turned around by now and started firing at the incoming infantry, especially as it is pretty damn tough, those Silver and Guard. One skirmish cap behind you, especially when it's so beaten down, isn't really a huge deal. Their damage output is pretty slow, so better off to turn around and try and put some damage on these tougher melee infantries. Just a little bit of a micro error, a minor thing, no big deal there. Now he's bringing the skinks right round the back, he's gone for this big flank. This has obviously been his plan, he's come into the battle with that plan, which is fine, nothing wrong with a good ambitious flank. Like I said, it is very risky though, because those skinks were unprotected. Now, the two magic mallards have gone after the skink chief here. They're looking to goon squad him down a little bit. He's running away. He should be able to get away here. He is a slight bit faster than these two, but they do seem to be gaining on him. At least one of them is. Maybe that one had a little speed boost. But here I think he should have curved around and come back to his army and tried to get to the ground so that he could get away from these two potentially by running through his own units. These skinks have come up behind the enemy army now, blasting away. Front lines are starting to clash. He is charging here. He did give an attack order. They look like they're not really charging there for some reason, but he definitely did give the attack order. Give him one here as well. So front lines starting to clash. Loth and Seaguar being blasted by the solar engines, but putting some damage on the skinks behind them. And now to another thing with these skinks. This is another fairly big mistake, I think, here. He's shooting at Loth and Seaguar. 3 units of chameleon skinks against 1 Loth and Seaguar. This should be killer, right? But guess what? I think there's one thing he's overlooked with these Loth and Seaguar, and that is their shield. Especially the fact that it's a silver shield. It blocks 55% of incoming missiles. So 55% of his ammo is going to absolute waste here. Even though the shields are on their back, I know it's ridiculous. They're still able to block from the front with their shields on their back. I don't know, whatever. That's how the game works. But still, a massive waste of ammo for all 3 of these units hammering away at this one Loth and Seaguar, but they're barely doing any damage. What he could have done here is at least split off 1 or 2 of the units and come around and started shooting these Silver and Guard in the back. The poison would have helped out the Sauruses, the shields wouldn't be able to protect them because it's from the back, so they could have done way more damage just flanking around and hitting those Silver and Guard. And I think one of the problems with his build here is that he doesn't have anything that can aggressively push on the enemy and start to disrupt those Loth and Seaguar, like a little bit of cavalry or maybe a single large monster that's not an artillery. He does have those 2 Bastillodons, but of course half of their role is staying back and using their ranged attack rather than getting into melee. So nothing too great for pursuing the enemy. He's going to try and catch this skirmish cap here, but they're going to run away just in the nick of time. Tyrion over here giving this Bastillodon some trouble. He's bringing over the Temple Guard to get after him. But Tyrion is another big problem for him in this battle because, again, he can't really keep a hold of him. He's brought over the Temple Guard, but Tyrion's off skis. He doesn't want to mess around with that. Even Tyrion on a horse can be pretty slippery and wiry and hard to keep a hold of, much like those Phoenixes. And another minor mistake, back to these chameleon skinks again, I'm banging on at them. But these 2 units are on top of each other, which defeats one of their best factors. That is, that they're so spaced out and far apart, which means missiles fired on them often miss because there's loads of gaps between them. So you want to make sure they're apart far enough. 3 units could be like this, nice and apart so they're not inside each other, making the most of all the space between those skinks, which will make the enemy miss more. Not to mention that they have a missile resistance anyway. And to be honest, you could probably charge these Loth and Seaguar at this point and go into melee with them and get rid of them, because they're low on leadership and health. Could have been a play there. The 2 enchanted geese over here are giving this Bastillodon trouble, teaming up on him. Tyrion's coming over as well. You can see the mobility advantage in these 3 units, Tyrion and the 2 Phoenixes. They're running around all over the place, doing whatever they want. He's doing alright in the rest of the battle though. His infantry is winning mostly. He's got a bunch of units with decent health still. So overall he's doing alright. Bringing these Temple Guard over here to take on some of these Silverin. I'm not entirely sure why. There is some Saurus over here doing fine. They've got plenty of health hanging in there. They could be much better use though right now, trying to get a hold of these pigeons and of Tyrion, or at least chasing them around. Going to drop these fiery vortexes here. 2 of them, doubling it up. He is going to mostly manage to get out of the way. Takes a bit of damage from that, but nothing too crazy, nothing too bad. He's alright. Chameleon Skinks still back here, basically doing nothing. Basically doing nothing because they're still firing at those silver shields, wasting a lot of their ammo. One of the Loth and Seaguar is going to break, but they don't really matter too much. The Loth and Seaguar don't have armor-piercing missiles, and you've got a fair bit of armor in your Lizardmen army, so you don't really need to worry about them greatly. There's only 2 units of them as well, so good to try and harass them, but not really a priority target to take out with your missiles. Those Phoenixes, though, they're who should have been the priority. They are who those missiles should have always been aimed at. Those two blazing budgies wouldn't have been as effective if they had constant missile pressure on them. It just allows you to control them a bit more. Even if you can't get a ton of damage on them quickly, if you can just make them run away from a situation you don't like them being in, that is a powerful tactic in itself. And this is something you can kind of expect from the High Elves. Double Phoenix, double Dragon, triple Dragon, 2 Phoenixes and a Dragon. All kinds of combos that will give you problems if you don't have any way to hold them down, or any way to blast them to pieces. In this case, Zakia did have the tools to potentially blast them to pieces, but he just used them in the wrong place, that was all. His army build was definitely capable of winning this battle, and he very nearly did. He just needed to take control of those 2 crispy crows. He played it pretty well overall, it was just the misuse of those chameleon skinks that let him down. He came in with the game plan to flank with those chameleon skinks, which is all well and good, but when he saw that there were 2 phoenixes, he should have adapted his plan and brought them into the rest of his army so they could work better from there. They could help protect ally units and be better protected themselves. And as we can see at the end of the battle here, he's pretty much got it won. It's just the phoenixes left that are harassing him, and Tyrion, who's knocking around. He's done some fair damage to one of the phoenixes and to Tyrion. He's got his skirmishers back here, still firing at those damn Lothan Seaguar, wasting his ammo. He could charge into melee and take those out, but they'd be way better off. Even though some of them have only got a little bit of ammo left, he could still bring them over and start trying to blast on these phoenixes. Maybe he could take one out and hope they don't get rebirth. Who knows? But at this point, it's probably a little bit too late. Phoenixes, Tyrion gooning on the old lord. He's doing a good job of keeping away, running through his units, trying to anyway. Those phoenixes are staying on him. He's getting his healing going. He seems to be keeping his magic up. He's been doing that for the whole battle, and healing magic's really good for that, especially for beginner players. It's so easy to use. It's just healing. There's not a lot to it. You don't need to think about it. When one of your better units gets hurt, you heal them up. If a group of your units are together, you heal them up. He's clumping up a little bit here with all of his infantry, trying to get after Tyrion. But this is just a minor mistake. We all commit a bit of clumping every now and again. But of course, you've got to remember those Phoenix and their vortexes, which are about to come in and ruin the day. There's 1. There's 2. And that is pretty much going to end the battle. But a valiant effort from Zakia. He nearly got him. Just couldn't quite take down the pigeons, needed his chameleon skinks over there, and they could have changed the course of this battle. Thanks again to him for sharing this replay with me and for having the cojones to let me share it with all the thousands of you. And now let's just take a quick look at the build to see if we can make it more high elf proof. This is Zakia's build here, pretty much as he had it. So starting off with the Life Slant and his abilities, he's got Life Bloom and the Conduit, which are always good choices. Doesn't have the Shield of the Old Ones or the Banishments though, which I think is a mistake, especially the Banishment particularly. Mostly because in his spells, he has the 2 healing spells, which is all well and good. These 2 are pretty much essential for this. But he has the Dwellers Below, which is a very expensive magic spell at 17 magic for not necessarily a lot of return. And if we take it off, you can see it costs 213, which conveniently is the cost of the much more powerful, in my opinion, Banishment. And you get 2 of them, and it doesn't cost you any magic. Sounds like a no-brainer, right? Much better than the Dwellers Below. Could potentially take out 2 units of Silver and Guard or 2 Lothan Seaguar. Onto the Skink Chief, he didn't have any of his abilities. He was on the Pterodon, of course. He does have, though, the War Drum, which is kind of a support ability, which probably isn't that useful most of the time. He could have taken that off, put it elsewhere, maybe into the Shield of the Old Ones. Is that... Oh, it's going to be a little bit too expensive. It's only 2, though, so you could probably lose that somewhere, as that Shield of the Old Ones will be way more effective and useful than that War Drum. Or you could just opt for the Slippery ability for the Skink Chief, and that would have helped him in the previous battle, but obviously that's a little bit of a hindsight thing. The Temple Guard acting as a bodyguard to the Slan, that's always a good move, pretty common to see. The Saurus frontline, good against the High Elves, only the armor piercing to watch out for. The Spears, potentially useful, potentially not, it depends on the enemy army. The Skinks, of course, always useful, great for taking down those air units. And it's the 2 solar engines, though, I think is where my biggest problem with this build lies. I think 1 is a good idea, because otherwise you don't have many ways to deal with the skirmish cav. And they can be very useful for sniping at dragons and things like that, unfortunately. Not for Arcane Phoenixes, though. But I think what's missing here is some mobility. So maybe some cavalry. We don't have much money, though. We'll lose a Saurus on the front line. That'll allow us to get 2 units of Cold One Spears. A little bit over. So we could maybe lose the Chief ability. There we go. So that puts us in there. So now we have some cavalry that could push on the enemy. You can get after those Lothan Seaguard. You could hammer and anvil those Silver and Guard in the back. You've got the anti-large bonus on this cav as well. You could get after the Phoenixes. You can stop them running away so easily because they'll be able to keep up with them. You can hold them in place better because they're higher mass. There's so much more you could do with this cavalry than you can do with maybe more infantry. So you could roll with that, but maybe a Carnosaur would be a good pick here to deal with those dragons and Phoenixes. To afford it, we could maybe lose the Saurus Spears, I think. They can be of limited use as they're easy to avoid for large units. They can just run away from them, but they can't really run away from a Carnosaur. It's much quicker. They can't run away from the cavalry or the chameleon skinks very well. So yeah, I think that's a reasonable army against the High Elves. It's pretty adaptable. You've got the cavalry that could either push on the enemy or be defense. Same with the Carnosaur. That could protect against any of those large units flying around, or it could go through and harass missiles. The solar engine can be quite adaptable in who it shoots at. Infantry, cavalry, large units, whatever. Could go into melee as well, potentially. So this army should be able to deal with most high elf armies that may come your way, whether it's got a bunch of single large monsters like the army we just saw, or maybe they've gone cav heavy, maybe they've gone infantry heavy with lots of sword masters, maybe there's tons of missiles. Whichever one of those builds it is, this build should be able to adapt to deal with it. So there's some things to think about for the Lizardmen when fighting the High Elves. So there we go. What went wrong for Zakia and his Lizardmen army? Hopefully he and you found this useful. Do let me know how you feel about the idea of this series in general. I am always curious on people's opinions on new series. If you like them, I'll keep doing more. If you don't, I won't. Simple. I think it's a good way to help an individual learn from their mistakes, but it's also good for everyone else because they may be making the same mistakes. And now they know not to do those things, hopefully. So no one that watches this video will ever again shoot Loth and Seaguar with shields with chameleon skinks. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. I will see you in the future.